to be with you all. My family couldn't come with you, but they do bring their greetings. I'm married to my beautiful bride, Tiffany, and we've been married for 7 years now. And so I wake up every morning and I say, sweetheart, you are a blessed woman, So, but cool. Hey, I heard you guys been talking about one of the coolest people in the Bible, one of the people I love the most, Elijah. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that tonight. So we're going to stay in the book of 1 Kings chapter 18. And so I'm going to skip all the way down to verse number 30. So that's where we will begin our journey tonight. But before we do that, let me just tell you a little story. I feel like we're family, so we can get to know each other. So we don't have any biological children yet. But our goddaughter has just completed her freshman year in college, right? I know. It just hit me. I'm like, I'm getting old. I am old, man. So, was it last year? She began driving. Pray. She got a new car, and she brings it over, and she shows it off. And she's leaving our house, and we give her farewells, and the next thing you know, there's a frantic knock back at the door. What's wrong? My car won't move. Why won't your car move? I don't know. Press the accelerator. I did. What's wrong with it? I don't know. So as any good godparent would, you go outside and you check on the car. The car is running, okay? The car is in drive. The car will not move. I'm like, holy cow. So then I had to put on my man hat, as any good man, I got this. We'll figure it out. Look under the hood there. But here's the deal, guys. I'm a city kid, man, so I couldn't even lie, right? So I got the hood up, and I'm on Google at the same time. And I'm at this for like 4 minutes, and I'm just like, I don't know. And my wife's like, hey, you want me to try something? No. I got this. Don't say that. Right. Don't say that. I know. So here I go, I'm back at it now. I've worked up a sweat, and I'm just cranky, and I'm like, what is going on? And my wife's like, do you want me to try something? And I'm like, no. And she's like, what are you trying? And I'm like, well, Google said do this. And she said these words that just changed my life. She said, well, how's that working for you? So then, you know what? Pride is done. I back away in shame, and my wife gets in the car, and she turns off the emergency brake. Yeah. Here's why I tell that story, because there are some people in 1 Kings chapter 18 that are just like me. They were trying something that did not work. I'm sure everyone in here has tried something that did not work. There were people just like me. There was a problem that needed to be fixed, and there needed to be a solution. Here's the cool thing I need you to understand tonight, students. Every problem has a solution. The question is, do you have the right solution? So, here we go. 1 Kings chapter 18, and starting verse number 30. And as we're doing that, let's just do a little background about what is happening in this text. Our dear friend Elijah is now threatening King Ahab. Elijah is what you call cray-cray, okay? You don't just throw threats at a king, sir. You can die, period. And so not only is he threatening the king, he is telling the king he's wrong. Here's what's happening, guys. There's a famine in Israel. That means there's no water. Oh, snap. And this has happened for the last 3 years. And so the king says, Elijah, this is your fault. You don't want to worship our gods, and because of that, now we're cursed. And Elijah goes, is that so? The last time I checked, this is your fault, because you won't serve my God. I think this is his way of punishing us. So here he goes. There's a showdown in all of Israel. The whole town comes out. Thousands and thousands of people. Elijah says this, how about we do this? Listen, we'll prove whose God is real. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to build an altar, and we're going to place an animal on the altar, and we're going to say, listen, whichever God we pray to and fire comes down, that's the God who's real. So back in Israel, they were worshiping these gods. Baal. Baal was the god of the sun. So sons should naturally breed fire, okay? Keep that in mind. So here's what happens. Elijah says, listen, I'm so confident in my God, I'm going to let you guys go first, okay? I'm going to let you pray as long as you want to pray. You can go first, and watch this. I will back away. And because your God, Baal, is the God of the sun, I'm sure this will work, okay? So here we go. We have this showdown, and we have these prophets, and they're praying, and they're crying out, and nothing is working. And Elijah is petty, and he's taunting them, and he's like, where's your God at? You must have texted him, and you don't see any dots. He's not texting back. What's going on? And there's this back and forth, and nothing is happening. They're out there all day. And then it even gets to the point where they are literally cutting themselves, okay? And nothing is happening. And so finally, it's Elijah's turn. And here's what I want to look at tonight, because here's what Elijah did that I believe that God is asking us to do tonight as a family here in Missouri, but as a generation. God's saying, listen, will somebody stand up for me? So here's the unique thing about this situation, friends, with Elijah. Elijah is one man out of the entire country that's taken a stand for God. He's not the only person that believes in God, but he's the only person that has courage to stand up for God. And I believe God is asking us the same question tonight. Will you have courage to stand up for me? So here's what I want to talk about quickly before I get out of your way. There's three things that I want you to know when it comes to taking a stand for God. So again, 1 Kings chapter 18, starting in verse number 30. First thing I want you to understand this. When it comes to taking a stand for God, students, you need to know God personally. It's kind of hard to stand up for somebody you don't know. Let's look at our text. It says in verse number 30, then Elijah said to all the people, come over here. So all the people came to him. He rebuilt the Lord's altar that had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes named after Jacob's son. The Lord had spoken his word to Jacob. Your name will be Israel. Elijah built an altar in the Lord's name with these stones. He also made a trench that could hold 12 quarts of grain around the altar. He arranged the wood, cut up the bull, and put the bull on the wood. Here's what's happening in this story. It is Elijah's turn to now prove that his God is real. So as we see, he put this bull on the altar. Here's why the altar is important, students. These guys who were worshiping this god of Baal, the number one thing they did when it was their turn, they began to jump on the altar and they broke it. Elijah's like, okay. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rebuild the altar. Why? Because the altar is the place where God meets us. He says, so if this is going to happen, we need to have the prime place where God's going to meet us. The first mistake the prophets of Baal made was you guys broke the altar. So the first thing Elijah did is he built an altar. So when it comes to taking a stand for God, you need to know him personally. You need to do this by building an altar. Watch this. How do you spell love? You guys are brilliant. Give yourselves a round of applause. That Missouri public school system, my goodness. Okay, here's how I spell love. You ready for this? I spell love T-I-M-E, okay? Why do I say that? Because what you love is where you spend your time. You don't know this yet because you should not be dating, and if they bring me back, I will give you my story on dating. Girls are crazy and boys are stupid. That's just the end of it, all right? Here, pray for me, I know. Here's why I say that. Love is where you spend your time. Many of us say, God, I love you, but I spend no time with you. Many of us say, yes, you know what? I do have a relationship with God, but I don't even spend any time with God. Students, the cool thing about this is that because of Jesus, we no longer have to build a physical altar. We can have an altar anywhere we go. But it takes us being willing to say, you know what? I'm going to set apart time to spend with God, okay? Another thing I need you to understand about this is whenever there's an altar, there has to be a sacrifice. So we see our dear friend Elijah, and there's a bull that they sacrifice, okay? And when you lay a sacrifice, this can't just be anything. This has to be something that is precious to you, something that means a lot to you. Why am I saying that? Because oftentimes we can be like the children of Israel, and we can have idols in front of God. But God's saying, listen, I want to know that I'm more important than your friends. I want to know that I'm more important than your social media accounts. I want to know I'm more important than your friends. I want to know that, listen, I'm the number one thing in your life. You see, when you lay a sacrifice, students, this is saying, God, I want you more than anything else. You know what's cool about this? In the Bible, in Matthew, it even says, listen, if you put God first, everything else will happen for you. Second thing I want you to know when it comes to taking a stand for God is you have to trust him fully, okay? Let's look at our text. Again, in verse number 34, the Bible says, he said, fill 4 jars with water. Pour the water on the offering and on the wood. Then he said, do it again. And they did it again. Then he said, do it a third time. And they did it a third time. The water flowed around the altar, and even the trench was filled with water. When it was time to offer a sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward. He said, Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, make known today that you are the God in Israel, and that I'm your servant, and have done these things by your instructions. Answer me, Lord. Lord, answer me. Then these people will know that you are the Lord, and that you are the God, and that you're winning back their hearts. See, Elijah did something pretty crazy. Elijah said, listen, I'm going to stand before this entire country. I'm going to stand before these kings, and I'm going to say, listen, all of you are wrong. Here's what you got to realize. Back in this time, if you believed in God, you were in fear of your life. So for Elijah to have this conversation in front of the king and to tell the king that he's wrong, this takes some boldness. But he had faith. So how do you trust God fully? You have to put faith over everything. See, oftentimes we say, God, I will do what you say if you show me. But you know what God says to us students? He says, listen, I don't need you to wait till I prove it to you. I need you to be courageous enough to say, you know what? I may not even see it yet, but I'm going to take the step because I know God always comes through. As faith is, right? Without faith, it's impossible to please God. He had to have faith. One man versus thousands. Can you imagine if this didn't work? Second component of this is after you have faith, you have to give God space to move, which I like to call make room for the miraculous. If you pray and ask God to do something, we have to believe that God's going to do it. Here's what I believe. In a few moments, we're going to have time to respond, and I believe that you're going to pray that God will do something in your life, and I believe that God's going to answer that. The last time I checked his track record, he's undefeated. So here's the crazy thing to me. Now, I'm a city kid. Y'all got to help me, man. I got any hunters in here? I got any outdoorsy people in here? Okay, cool. Now, I don't know much about I know much about hunting. Okay, the only time I hunt is when I'm shopping for something in the mall. But I never really went camping. I was a Boy Scout for 3 days and didn't work out. We won't talk about it. But here's one thing I know. I know that when you're building a fire and when you build wood, the number one component that you don't need to build a fire is water, right? Makes 0 sense. So if you look in our story, our friend Elijah had his friends pouring gallons and 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 gallons of water on wood. So I could imagine the people there were like, this dude is nuts. He's lost it. Water is not the key ingredient to building a fire. But you know what I love about this? Elijah's God, the God we serve, specializes in impossible situations. Here's why I say that. Because many of us say, listen, I may have a problem. I may have a challenge. It's too big for me, but the cool thing about this is it's not too big for God. You may be praying saying, listen, I really wish things in my life would change. And every time I try and change them, or every time I try to make something happen, it doesn't work. And God said, listen, I need you to trust me and make it happen. But God, I tried it and it didn't work. That's why I'm God. You're not. You see, what's cool about this is God specializes in the impossible, in situations that should not work for anyone else, especially within our lives. So growing up, I grew up in Denver, Colorado. I got any Broncos fans in here? All right. I'll give it to you guys. Mahomes is the man. Grew up, it was just me and my mom. I had no brothers and sisters, so I had a lot of imaginary friends, okay? But here's the crazy thing about this. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. It was just my mom and I, and things were really hard for us. We had almost zero money. I joke, I say this all the time, that we were so poor that we couldn't afford the R, okay? We were just poo. Like, it was just her and I. And my mom was chronically ill, and so I'll never forget this. At 4 years old, I saw my parents having a conversation in the living room, and that conversation said something like this: we're getting a divorce. So now my world is drastically changing, and I'm like, what am I going to do? So from that day on, my father walked out of my life, and so my mom's already sick, and she can't work, and Dad went away, and so Dad thought it was a good idea to choose drugs and alcohol over his family, and so my entire life, I grew up in troubling situations. I got the opportunity to go to college, and they loved me so much that after the first semester, they put a letter in my mailbox and said, due to your poor academic performance, you have been expelled, right? Expensive party, guys. I'm still paying for it. Craziness. I remember being in my room in Mom's house, getting kicked out of college, saying, God, I've already messed up my life. I'm sure you probably can't do anything with my life, so it's over for me. God, I'm not like my friends. All my friends got their moms and dads, and they got a lot of money, and things are working out for them. But God, that just may not be for me because I didn't pick the lucky straw or something. I don't know. Now, fast forward, guys, about 15 years. Here's the cool thing. This college kid that got kicked out of college, who grew up in a broken home, a single parent home. God has blessed me to speak all over the country and even overseas. I not only have a degree, I have 3. Why do I say that? Because God specializes in impossible situations. I don't know what you came in here with tonight, but I want to challenge you. I want you to be like Elijah. I want you to be so courageous to put this before God and say, God, I know you can do something with it. The last thing you need to understand tonight, students, when it comes to taking a stand for God, is you need to be able to execute his assignment boldly. And this is where that faith comes in. I love this because in verse number 38, it says this: so a fire from the Lord fell down and consumed the burnt offering, wood, stones, and dirt. The fire even dried up the water that was in the trench. All the people saw it and immediately bowed down to the ground. The Lord is God, they said. The Lord is God. Elijah told them, seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let any of them escape. The people seized them. And Elijah took them to the Kishon River, and slaughtered them there. Here's the cool thing, students. When you take a stand for God, and when you give God an opportunity to work in your life, he doesn't fail. And that's why you can operate with courage. A few years ago, I was in Anchorage, Alaska, and I was just talking to a room of students just like this, and one young lady was so inspired that she went back to her high school and she started a Bible club, and this was a public school, and so she got permission from her principal, started the Bible club. Her name is Hope. And I said, well, how did it go? She was like, well, okay. I was like, awesome. She said, yeah. How many kids showed up? There's this one guy, and he's like super awkward. I'm like, oh, okay. And I said, well, hey, I'm going to pray that you believe God told you to do this, that, hey, he's going to work it out. And so I would check in with her, and she said week after week there was this same guy, and he was awkward, and she'd give a Bible study with this awkward guy, and something happened. That awkward guy brought his awkward friends. And then they begin to bring friends. And they begin to bring friends. And guys, before you know it, at a public high school, over 70 students were meeting every week to have Bible study. Here's the crazy thing. It wasn't something the teachers did. It wasn't something the principal instituted. It was one student who said, you know what? I believe this is what God wants to do for my friends, for my school, for my city. And I believe there's some students in this room tonight that God said, listen, there's some things that I not only want to do for you, I want to do through you. As the worship team comes back, the power of this is, listen, you guys are the answer to a lot of people's problems. And the devil does not want you to see that. Because the moment you see that, not only will your life change, you have the power to change a lot of other people's lives. But oftentimes when it comes to being used by God, we say, you know what? Well, I have to remember all the right Bible verses. I have to be perfect. I have to never make mistakes. The cool thing about this is this word called grace. And God loved us enough. He knew we could not keep it together on our own, so he gave us his son, Jesus. And because of that, God gives his workers the power to stand up for him. See, Elijah stood in front of thousands that day. As I studied this, guys, there were over 7,000 other people in Israel at that time that believed the same thing that Elijah did. But how is it that one man took on almost 400 prophets, an entire king, and an entire country? Because listen, he believed in the God of the impossible. Maybe you're in here tonight and your life is kind of like mine. You're saying, Pastor Greg, it hasn't always been pretty. It hasn't always been perfect. But let me tell you something tonight, students. I believe as you respond to God, he's going to say this to you. Not only do I love you, I actually like you. And things may have not always worked out perfectly for you, but guess what? I'm the God of second chances. And you may be like me too. You may say, listen, I've tried this, but I continue to make mistakes, and I'm not perfect, and I always let him down. Here's what I love about my Bible. I read it, and it said, the righteous man falls 7 times, but he gets back up 8. And maybe you've fallen down, but God's saying, listen, I'm going to give you the power to get back up to your feet. And lastly, you may be in here and you say, listen, Pastor Greg, listen, I don't even know if this is real. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I do know there are some things in my life that I need help with. And maybe God's asking you tonight, he's saying, listen, I need you to give me an opportunity to just simply be in relationship with you. As I look across this room, I see so many students, I see so many stories. And what I love about this is, who knows who God has in this room? Because something happened at that college that I got kicked out. There were three young ladies who invited me to a Bible study. And because of them, my life was changed. And I've been serving in ministry now for over 10 years because they had the courage to stand up. So here's my question. Who's going to stand up tonight? Let's worship.